I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker, Todd Helmus. So I encountered Todd because he compiled kind of the most comprehensive summary of all the research that had been done on deepfake videos. And this is obviously already upon us. It's not in the future, it's already here with us. And so I'm really pleased to introduce Todd Helmus. He's a senior scientist and faculty member at RAND and an expert in deepfake videos. So Todd, take it away.
Yeah, Todd Helmus from RAND Corporation. I'm excited to be here. Let me just get going with this. So truth decay. Before we even talk about deep fakes or any of this new technology, we'd have to sort of take recording of the time we're in right now. RAND calls it a time of truth decay, which it defines as the diminishing role of facts and analysis in American public life. We didn't need deep fakes to cause January 6th. We didn't need deep fakes to introduce all sorts of questions about election integrity. And we have not needed deep fakes to cause violent extremism, either in the Middle East or at home. So we have all these problems to begin with, and now we're just going to sort of layer on top of that this deepfake issue. And obviously, photographs have been important to us since the time we could take them. Obviously, we're seeing images we know and we can prove that the Holocaust existed because we have the images of it. Same for Tiananmen Square and landing on the moon and 9/11. These images have really been foundational to our understanding of how we see the world and how we see the reality of that world. And obviously with deep fakes, this is all going to be changing relatively quickly. So this is the paper I'll talk about. This paper is almost OBE right now because the technology has evolved so much. I've had to add a bunch of work to the slides to make sure that we're up to date on this explosion of growth in this area. So hopefully I'll do that justice. All right, so today I'll talk about these four things. We'll talk about the different deepfake technologies that are available right now, and many of these will obviously be familiar to you all. And I will pay less attention to telling you that you can do a deepfake image than trying to highlight how adversaries, I'll really try to focus on highlighting how adversaries are going to be making use of this technology, both domestically and abroad. We'll talk about the potential consequences of these, some mitigating factors, which are becoming less mitigating over time. And then we'll talk about initiatives to counter deepfakes. All right, so just to start off, we're all familiar with DALL-E. I wasn't sure how to order these events, these types of technologies, but hopefully this will make sense. But obviously we know we can do text to image generation, and this doesn't seem very threatening to be able to create images like this. I think it's more threatening to artists and artistic integrity maybe than the reality that which we live. But then, of course, we have generative text, and you're obviously all familiar with GPT-3 and the GPT-4, which is available now. This technology, I think, will be really helpful to adversaries. China, in particular, has struggled to create English language content, for example, that can effectively reach the United States, even Russia, when it started its 2016 campaign. Their social media posts that were attacking the US election, the early ones were fairly questionable. ChatGPT really changes that dynamic for them. They should be easily able to create compelling English language content, not only just create the content, but to do it at scale. And this will be helpful for China in a couple different ways. And I talk about China because they've made really use of this method that we call barrage jamming. Barrage jamming is a technique that's used in counter radar. So, basically blinding a radar with noise. And China really uses this technique to get away to help subvert against bad news that they're receiving. So what you see here on this image on the right is of a call girl or a prostitute or something along those lines, an escort service that China was using to flood the English language Twitter airways with during their COVID protests. So, and these would oftentimes almost always have the same hashtag that you would use. So if you wanted to search COVID protests in China, you'd use the hashtag. And unfortunately, that hashtag would just bring you to all these images of escorts. They also do this with the Uyghur population in the Xinjiang province, where they flood the Xinjiang hashtag with pictures of cotton, which are fields of cotton, which is Xinjiang's primary export product. So again, it's really meant to help subvert true information and people accessing true information, but they'll be able to do this at scale. And here we see a deep fake image. Again, maybe innocuous. It's just a picture of a guy on a Twitter post here. Back in 2019, Facebook detected its first large set of fake images that were attendant to astroturfing posts like this. I forget if I think they were from Russia or China, I'm not sure, but they were basically using the fake images on these Twitter posts. And the reason they would do that is because until that time, researchers could often determine if a Twitter account was fake if they could do a reverse image search on the image, on the photograph, and see, like, you see a picture of me on here and you could do a reverse image search and you'd quickly find that I'm a guy that works at Rand Corporation and not the fake image that's used on this post. But now obviously adversaries can very quickly and easily create fake profile images that can subvert our typical ways of identifying some of these fake social media accounts. And obviously you're familiar with this image from Midjourney of Trump. This is sort of another angle of the deep fake images. I mean, we've known about creating the fake social media posts for some time. This is now hot on the scene to be able to create images like this in real time of events, even before the events take place, because this was published before he was arraigned. Obviously has unique aspects on how adversaries could make use of this, and a lot of people believed in this content, obviously. So you know, that just becomes another angle at which adversaries can use this content to sort of sow chaos here. And you know, my other comment on this is it's so easy to create this. And there's almost little controls on it right now. There's no obvious watermarking on these images or labels that I feel like if you want to create, if you're into creating disinformation, you'd almost be a fool not to use this technology. It's just so easy to create and use that my assumption is that we will just be seeing an explosive growth in this from disinformants. The other angle is voice cloning. We've been able to do voice cloning for a while. Even back in 2019, a CEO of a British firm received a call from one of his suppliers asking to wire $240,000, and he did it. Turned out that supplier was not his supplier, and it was a fake generated voice that was used to authorize that transfer. So these were around. I really see one of the interesting areas or implications of this on the military side. One can imagine in Ukraine, a Russian officer or a Ukrainian officer receives a call from his commander, tell him to move or not move forces or do something. There's really good chances, I think, in the future that those types of calls will be fabricated in an effort to sort of mess with adversary forces. Not to mention the implications on the financial market side. And I think this has already been used in Zoom calls. Again, another interesting angle on the technology. So here, I'm sure many of you have seen this. I thought about putting something new on this instead of the Deep Tom Cruise, but really I feel like this captures state of the art, even though it's 2021. And I'll just do a quick play. This is a deep fake. This is a, by the way, slightly different type of technology. These are created, these are basically face swapping videos. You basically have an actor who can work the same mannerisms and characteristics of the individual they're trying to fake. And then you basically use a lot of footage of the person you're trying to project onto that actor, using basically generative adversarial models with basically you have one generator working to generate images from random noise, and then you have a discriminator that works against that generator to detect the fakeness of the images. And through that process, they're able to create rather highly compelling videos. These right now are probably the most, definitely the most accurate fake videos you can create. I'll talk about some other ways of creating fake videos, but this is definitely the state of the art. But it does take some time and effort, but we'll just play it quick.
In this reel, you're going to see my amigo, Chris Umi. He's going to introduce to you the wonderful world of deepfakes, how AI and VFX are unlocking the future of our imagination. What's up, TikTok? You guys cool if I play some sports?
So you can see a little bit of the process undergirding how they create these images. All right. But you know, this is 2021 technology. It's gotten better since then. It's going to keep getting better. One thing I'll note about these videos, it's important to note, is these videos are not cheap, quick, and easy to make necessarily. To make a very high quality deep fake that looks imperceptible to the eye requires a pair of expensive computer generators. It requires having a decent actor who could film this sequel, who could basically mimic the appropriate characteristics that you're trying to mimic. It takes a lot of film footage of the actor that you're trying to fake. And it also takes time. It could take upwards of a couple months to create high quality videos like this. Once the generators do their work, then oftentimes to get it right, you have to go frame by frame and then tweak some of these images over time. So these are not quick and easy, which I think is relevant to this next image. Nope, not what I want. Nope. Okay, let's try this. So this is a deep fake of Zelensky. And I think it's important to think about all these characteristics about how like not automatic it is to create this content, because this is actually quite a bad video. You can see the movement is not realistic. Body's not moving. There's just all sorts of aspects of this video that and I can't speak to the language quality, but I think there are issues with that as well. It's interesting because you'd think we worry about Russia being the actor that right now who's probably at their top of their game, or at least we thought they were at the top of their game as a propagandist outfit. And they knew they were going to go into this war for a while. Obviously, they thought that it was going to be a quick turn war, and so maybe they didn't see a need for this. But it's obvious that they created this video with sort of being short on time. And I think if they had put more effort into it earlier, it could have been a better video. Now, whether or not it would have made a tactical difference on the battlefield, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, in this video, Zelensky's calling, I think, for surrender of forces or something like that. And that didn't work out for the Russians. The Ukrainians. So now with there's sort of a new angle on this, which I think is really interesting, is we can do completely synthetic images. This actress you're seeing here, and I'll do this video, and it shows, the video is interesting because it shows how the content is created. But this same actress appeared on a Chinese YouTube news program that was directed toward American audiences. It was in English, with an English accent. And basically the newscaster was complaining about how the US was suffering from various different types of maladies. So this has already been used in a Chinese propaganda campaign. And I think Venezuela has also been using this. We're going to see this pop up pretty quickly. And if you're not clear, this is, you can basically go to this website called Synthesia. They have probably 20, 30 different avatars that you can choose from. And I think this works out really well if you're a business and you need to create a training video. You feed it the text, you choose your accent, you choose your actor, and now you have a training video, relatively cheap and easy. It's not good for the Actors Guild, but probably pretty good if you're looking to produce cheap content for your corporation. But the problem is there's no controls on how these videos are used. So actors like China and Venezuela, and I'm sure many more. I know there's been a number of other disinformation videos created with this content that haven't been made public yet. So anyway.
Hey there, I'm Anna, and I'm an AI avatar. In this short video, I'll share with you the story of how I became an avatar and quickly explain the process of creating one. An AI avatar is a digital twin of a real person. For example, yours truly is an AI avatar of a real actress. The process of creating me started in a professional studio, where the real actress was filmed reciting the script. After that, the footage was processed by Synthesia's avatar producers, and after an AI abracadabra, a digital twin of the real actress came to life. And that's me. Coming also with the ability of speaking over 60 different languages and accents. The AI avatars you'll find in Synthesia are all digital twins of real actors. They have a contractual agreement with Synthesia to provide their likeness for business-related videos only. A team of content moderators makes sure that nobody breaks the rules, so it is impossible to spread misinformation,
That's not true, I don't think.
or obscenity through videos created in Synthesia Studio. By the way, you can also create your own avatar by simply requesting one directly in the app. And that's a wrap of my short story.
I think it's interesting that we're going to be seeing some of these AI generation companies struggle with the same issues that Facebook and Twitter have been dealing with for some time. And that is ensuring the appropriate use of their content and the application of rules, or making sure people play by the rules on their platforms. I think for Synthesia to moderate effectively, they'd almost need to watch every single video. The videos are all look pretty much the same. It's just the word content that's different. So anyway, obviously they don't have their controls in place because this is already being used for malicious ends. And one thing I will say is, if we think about the different types of risks that we get from deep fake content, this is probably on the more negligible, lower side. I feel like this type of content creates easy market entry to actors who, foreign actors and domestic, who need a live person and can't afford it. So really what you're offering here is a low-cost actor to do the work for you. That's not obviously the same as having, say, an image of showing President Biden drunk or President Trump getting arrested. That type of content obviously increases the risk level quite significantly. Okay. Finally, there's text to video. I don't have an image of this. I would just say these images are really bad. But you can create a video of a dog running through a field, or I guess that's a giraffe on a TV. But the images are a long ways off from being realistic. Well, I don't know about a long ways off. They're definitely not realistic now. How quickly this technology comes up to speed, I think, will be interesting. But to the extent that one could eventually be able to do text to video creation on content, I think that presents a unique danger and threat, because right now it would certainly overcome the cost and expense of creating a regular face swapping video. So And then the only issue will be whether or not there's industry controls in these videos that would allow some consumer protections. And we'll talk about that in a second. All right, so what are the potential consequences? One thing that's interesting is, as I was reading the literature last year for this paper, it was numerous dark scenarios of how the world is going to be turned upside down. And really, you're limited only to your imagination of what type of risk factor we're dealing with. A video that happens late October prior to an election that upends an outcome, that's certainly conceivable. Exacerbating social divisions, a video or images showing a police officer with a boot on an African-American, or an African-American doing something to a police officer. Those certainly could happen. And if people believe them, then there's really no limit on what the implications are now. And we're probably going to be a lot worse in countries outside the United States. When I briefed folks from India and Sri Lanka and Nepal and places like that, I mean, they were really worried about the consequences of this having on, like, for example, in India, Muslim Hindu relations. Then, of course, there's undermining just trust in institutions will certainly happen. And my guess is that all these things will happen at some point. The only question will be, and I'll talk about this at the end, is at what level we adjust to this new reality. So several factors. This is from my report. I think this is getting increasingly OBE here. But, the face swapping videos take time and they take effort. And, still, even if we can create these images, shallow fakes. Think about Nancy Pelosi being drunk at the lectern at Congress when they slowed her speech down. That was a very simple fake to do, but it was effective. And the audiences that wanted to believe it, believed it, or even if they didn't believe it, they regaled in it. And of course, the high quality fakes take time, money, and talent. Deepfake tech, once used, is more detected. So if an adversary has a very high quality deepfake that they want to use, they want to protect that deepfake and use it only at a select time, because the way these models are created, these GAN networks are used, is once you release a new deepfake into the wild, then that deepfake is now more detectable. Anyway, and of course, there's geopolitical risk of Russia or China introducing some high profile event that can, say, undermine an election. My guess is that would incur very significant geopolitical risk of sanctions, threats of other types of events that would make them think twice. So yeah, the world is scary. It will probably be bad, but there's probably also some controls in this process that might limit how bad it is. But these controls are really going to be only in place for a short time, I think. The videos are going to get too good to get detected. I'll talk about detection next. So I'll talk through my last minutes here, some initiatives to counter deepfakes. So there is detection. Detection is really built into, there's different ways of detecting this content. For the face swapping video, the detection is in a way built into the generation of the content. And so these detectors have been around. The US has been spending a lot of money on these detectors. 20 million, I think. DARPA spent 20 million in 2021. I think they were trying to get another 20 million for the following year. I forget if they actually got that, but they're spending loads of money on being able to detect these types of videos. The challenge, of course, though, is that these detectors aren't very good. Facebook did a competition last year where they did, 2 years ago, where they had folks work to create new detectors on deepfake content. And for detectors that were for new types of content, new types of deepfake content, the detectors were only 65% accurate. And these detectors are going to get worse over time as the technology improves. And a classic example is 2018, we learned that the videos didn't have proper eye blinking rates. And within almost a matter of weeks, those false eye blinking rates were fixed on the videos. So it's definitely arms race here, and it's probably in favor of the creators and not the detectors. Deepfakes, there's a policy response that can be put in place for these types of deepfakes. But right now, obviously, in the United States, Congress has a really hard time doing anything together. So I know that there's legislation by Yvette Crane on the Deepfake Protection Act that would require watermarking on some of these videos or labels. There's been several laws at the state level, but there just haven't been enough deepfakes to be able to test these laws yet. So I think it really becomes a key question. There's talk about Haney Freed, who's a big expert in this place, talks about creating requiring watermarking on some of the diffusion AI images that are created, so we can be able to detect those. This is sort of digital watermarking. And in theory, app stores could require the deepfake generators that go on their platforms to do some type of watermarking, which would at least start to limit the problem set a little bit. I feel like one of the big solutions in space is for provenance. The Content Authenticity Initiative is a collaboration of New York Times, Adobe, TruePic, and a bunch of others. And their basically goal is to, when a photo gets taken on a specialized camera with specialized software on the camera, you can choose to preserve key facts of that image. And it basically creates a digital record of the images that are taken on that. And then in theory, when you post that on social media, people can see what changes you've made to the content. And this really provides an opportunity of developing some type of media that we can have trust in. The problem is right now that type of technology needs to get expanded. The social media platforms don't let that technology operate on it. They're just starting to manufacture the cameras, specialized cameras that you can use to create these types of provenance-focused images. So it'll be a little bit before that gets circulated enough in the system where it can be useful. But I imagine 10 years from now, where we have no trust in any media, we will be able to have trust in images from places like the New York Times and other key outlets because they use this technology. And then finally, media literacy. I think the key with media literacy is it's just going to be really key to educate as many people as possible about this technology right now. I do take heart in the explosion of growth in this right now that is leading everybody to get educated real quick on this. I do feel at some point the ultimate solution is going to be for us to not trust non-provenance-based images. So I feel like this world we're in right now where we can see a photo and trust it is going to be antiquated at some point. And my guess is that we will need to get there sooner rather than later to avoid the maladies that we get from trusting content that ought not to be trusted. This is the conclusion of my brief. I think the key recommendations in the space are just continuing to do more, continuing to work on the regulation space and make and the industry coordination on that regulation space, expanding provenance-based initiatives, expanding education. Unfortunately, it's just sort of doing more of what we have been doing only a little bit of so far. But otherwise, thank you all. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk through this work.
Thank you, Todd. You've brought together many threads from the morning, and I think in a world where AI is now in the wild, and in a world where Gen Z in particular gets a lot of their financial information from YouTube and TikTok, this is highly relevant, and I'm hoping that all of our students here at NYU emerge being finfluencers for good. So thank you for making this incredibly important conversation happen here.